In general, I like to sit by the window in the evening with a cup of hot strong tea. I like to think about different things and breathe fresh air. It was these desires that led me to the strangest story in my everyday life. I live in a small town that looks like a big village, almost on the outskirts, and this place is bypassed by many. Here, opposite each other, cozy wooden houses are located, and that's just about the house opposite. Now we will talk about. The first time I noticed the oddity was a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't want to notice it. Honestly. I was just looking at the street, drinking hot tea, and at one point my gaze caught on the house opposite. There, in the room in front of the TV, my friend Fedor was sitting, and something made me look at him for a while. Fyodor was sitting on the sofa in a strange position, leaning forward and stretching out his hand to a table nearby. It was as if he reached for a remote control or a cup and froze. 1 minute, 2, 3, 10 m. How is it? I said out loud, and continued to watch. This activity scared me more and more every second. Fyodor continued to sit in the same position, and I already thought that maybe something had happened to him, and I wanted to go check on him, but in an instant he seemed to come to life. As if nothing had happened, he reached for the table, took the remote control, and switched the channel, then got up and went to the kitchen, and everything became normal. The rest of the evening I thought about what it was and how it happened, but I could not find the answer. But the most interesting thing is far from it. Now, almost every evening, I saw this strange picture. Fedor came home from work, went to cook dinner for himself, and then the inexplicable happened. He froze in strange poses for 20 minutes, and then, as if nothing strange had happened, continued his business. And now everything has rolled somewhere in a completely unthinkable direction. Interest, this is a very scary thing. It is he who will probably ruin me someday. One day, on my way home, I went to the store and bought binoculars, the best. From now on, in the evenings, I sat down with a cup of hot tea at the window and watched the house opposite. A strange freezing occurred in Fyodor constantly, and now almost finding the answer, which was that he had some kind of illness, everything crumbled to dust in an instant. In the house next door, the same thing was happening. In every house on the other side of the street, at different times, but every day, for about 20 minutes, people froze. What the hell is going on there? What did you do yesterday? I asked Fedor when I finally decided to delve into my investigation. We met him at the store, and standing in line, I began to quietly question the witness of the inexplicable. Yes, I came after work, had dinner, and went to bed. I'm a little sick, apparently still, my legs hurt, Fedor answered me. Yes, of course, he's sick, I thought, remembering how yesterday, he stood for about an hour motionless in the hallway. When I asked if he watched the game of our national team yesterday, he replied that he could not. I came home too late, apparently I was delayed in traffic. No. He went into the house at exactly 18:30, there were still 40 minutes left before the end of the game, he had to make it, but he froze in the hallway for a damn hour. It's just crazy. It's just some damn thing. He just doesn't remember this time stop, he just doesn't remember. From now on, I began to ask him about his life, about possible oddities and incidents, but in response I received the same thing. Everything is fine, only there is not enough time catastrophically. There's not enough time, come on, really? I always thought, and I was already on the verge of telling him everything, but what could I tell him? I've been following you for a month now, sitting in the evenings with binoculars in my hands. To be honest, although I was worried about Fedor and the rest of the tenants from the houses opposite, I really got worried a little later, late in the evening of November 30th. The evening of the 30th of November. As usual, I sat down with binoculars and started watching the residents from the houses opposite. Everything happened as usual, they returned home, did household chores, and then everything stopped, froze. Not all at once, but in turn, it happened in every house. And so I look after Fyodor, I watch him standing in the hallway without moving, as his hand reaches for the hanger, and suddenly something dark runs past the window. Something dark, big and fast, looking like a very hunched man with black bumpy skin and long black fur, runs past the window in Fyodor's house, approaches him, looks at him and skips on, to where I can't see. And suddenly, I jumped up in surprise when this creature abruptly returned to the window and looked right at me. A black and grey face covered with bumpy skin, without ears and nose, looked at me with bright, piercing dark eyes. I abruptly closed the curtains. My heart started beating very hard. I was noticed by someone I never expected to see. Listening to every rustle, every creak, I sit at the curtained window with binoculars. And suddenly I hear a very loud knock on the door. Turning sharply towards the window, I look into the house opposite. There, fire door continues to live quietly. The trouble has passed him by and is now knocking on my door. I hardly remember what happened after that. The flimsy wooden door flew off its hinges, opened wide, and a short figure stood on the threshold, very similar to a human, but it was not. A hunched something of black color, with lumpy black skin and sometimes long thick fur, flashed bright eyes in the semi-darkness of my house, growled slightly, and rushed in my direction. I'm standing with my phone in my hand. My head hurts a little, I'm pretty shaky. Memory is gradually returning, the ruined door is terrifying. I quickly look at my watch, realizing with horror that the previous 20 minutes have flown by for me like a single moment that I don't remember. Since then, my life has changed dramatically. That evening I packed up all my things and left my house. On the way, I called Fedor, told him everything, at which he laughed and hung up. Well, he's right. I've heard a lot of scary and not so good stories that it's enough to just leave a bad place, just hoot away and everything will end as abruptly as it once began, and I hoped for it. But not all hopes come true. Now, every evening passes extremely quickly for me. No matter how many apartments and houses I change, no matter how much money I spend, it's all for nothing. As soon as I get home, I immediately turn on the dictaphone, which records everything that happens, and I'll tell you this every time, from 20 minutes to 1 hour disappears from my life. I don't remember it, but the recorder remembers it. During this lost time, silence can be heard on the recording, interrupted by creaks and heavy growling. Yes, it followed me, and now I can't even imagine, but how can I be saved? I began to look for answers, began to read a lot of resources, got into history so deeply that it was already impossible to get out. I was constantly thinking about it, looking for it, and one day, I came across a short story of my long-time former neighbor. This man, Ivan Mitrofanovich, lived on our street for a long time, and at some point left there. To a psychiatric hospital. One day, he declared that he was wasting his time. His relatives put him in the hospital for a while, after which he came out and now lives nearby, in an old cozy house. And I went to him. I called in advance, told about the problem, and went. Do you also lose days? An unpleasant-looking old man asked me, in whose face one could read joy. Don't think it's funny to me, it just always makes it easier for people when they find out they're not sick, said my interlocutor, looking around the room. I need your story and some more advice on what I should do next, I said, hoping that he would know how to get rid of my illness. Ivan Mitrofanovich, noticeably cheered up, began his story from afar. He told me first about his childhood, then about his youth, did not forget to also inform me about how he became a pioneer, and finally got to the story of the creature that brought him here. It feeds on time, our time with you. I had never looked at the calendar before, until the moment when I realized that my time was going somewhere. It does everything perfectly, chooses the moments, chooses the quantity, so that you don't even guess that it is parasitic. But it happens that it gets very carried away. That's when I noticed. Some days I just flew into oblivion, it took advantage of my absent-mindedness. And they didn't believe me, they said nonsense, madness. How can I drive him away? I asked, hoping for an answer. Nothing. This creature feeds on our time, it will not fall behind, it is impossible to escape. He doesn't care about distances and obstacles. It watches, it listens to every conversation. It can do unimaginable things, such as turning into people you know. It is unwise to fight him. You can never defeat what you don't fully understand. The slight smile that slipped on Ivan Mitrofanovich's face confused me. The speeches of my former neighbor confused me, made me think, and finally, I smiled back at him, quietly got up from the table, shook his hand, and said, "Thank you, it seems that I have to go." The boards creaked softly under my feet, Ivan was silent, I was silent too. I left this house, wrapped myself in a coat from the merciless blizzard, opened the gate, and wanted to leave as soon as possible. Except I saw something familiar. Ivan Mitrofanovich continued to sit at the table. He was smiling broadly and even waved at me, but in the next window, in the next room, frozen in one pose, stood Ivan Mitrofanovich. Real. Wrapping myself even more tightly in my coat, but no longer from the blizzard, but from fear, I waved something in response to him and walked with quick steps towards the bus stop. From that day on, everything went differently. Now, everything seemed to be fine. I've got a lot more time. Listening to the next recording, I did not find any moments on it that I would not remember. For some reason, everything has passed. And today, I found out why. Tonight, on my way home, I looked in the mailbox. There was a letter there, without stamps, without the address of the sender and recipient. Going into a rented apartment, I sat down by the window as usual and began to read it. Dear friend, we haven't seen each other for a long time, and we won't see each other at all. I'm fine, you don't have to worry. Yes, I stopped visiting you, stopped taking something from you. You then asked me, how do I drive him away, but there is simply no answer to this question. You cannot drive away or kill something that has been dead for a long time, that is not life. You figured out who I am, I know. You have gone far in your search, and your desire to save your time is surprising. So there are two pieces of news for you. The first is a little secret. Since childhood, you, your father, mother, your neighbors, and everyone, have given me part of their time. No one notices this, because they do not follow him. And you didn't notice, for the time being. It was only when you put the recorder on that you started to understand something. I could have destroyed it, erased the record, but I was interested to see what you would do next. The second is a small gift. Your search and desire to gain control over your time, I was amazed. It's great when people sincerely appreciate it, because it's the only thing they really have. Well done, you've earned your time entirely, spend it as you see fit, I won't bother you anymore. But what will you spend it on? Go ahead, now, the whole life is in your hands.